Probably everyone here has something on the calendar for the next day or two. Most of us have plans for the next week or the next month. But I wonder if there's anyone here that has something on the calendar for a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 or 10 years. I'm here to talk about an event planned for 20 years into the future. On January 1st, 2043, at exactly 11 p.m., I plan to complete a project that I started thinking about almost a decade ago. My story begins on a Tuesday when my doctor ordered an ultrasound. Within 48 hours, I was in the hospital having cancer removed from my body. It was a fairly simple procedure to stop the cancer from spreading and, eventually killing me. The first thing I did when I left the hospital was I went to Wegmans, of course. 6'6". I must have looked really strange, right? 6'6", this tiny little cart, walking very slowly, looking at everything as though it was the first time I was seeing anything. And this stupid smile on my face, knowing that I had a whole new life in front of me. And the real question was, what was I going to do with this life, this perfect gift that had been given to me by modern medical science? And my answer was music. Having a second chance at life, I wanted to do what I could to live longer and healthier. And we know about exercise, nutrition, sleep, things that are linked to longevity. But what about incorporating a practice of creativity into my life? Like writing and recording music, which is something that I love to do. Eventually, I came up with the idea of creating a 24-hour album. And the name of the project is A Day in Music. Here's how it works. 24 hours of music divided into 24 albums, each one based on an hour of the day. Each hour is divided into 12 songs, and each song is inspired by a specific period within that, or a specific event in that 5-minute period. 24 hours of music that represent the joys and the struggles that define us as humans. Now here's the important part, the really important part. I never have to rely on inspiration because it's already built into the project in the form of researching all sorts of events based on time-specific, a certain time of the day. So, for example, if we look at the first few songs on the 1 a.m. album that's already been released, at 1 a.m. on December 31st, 1983, lead guide Father Jonathan woke up a group of vacationing climbers to ascend to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. That's a song. At 1:07 a.m. on February 2nd, 1915, a German agent named Werner Horn lit a bomb in Vanceboro, Maine in an attempt to blow up a bridge used for transporting war supplies. To me, that sounds like an awesome song. At 1:10 a.m. on October 20th, 2007, a father writes to his newborn daughter in a journal that will be given to her someday. That's a song. All these songs just come from me looking at time-specific events. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to listen to some of this music. The following samples are taken from the first 3 hours of music that have already been released.
Basement, so inviting, arrival, destination follow. Sea gates with the ocean, straight to Gibraltar, pillars of Hercules stand tall. Don't wait, forever's long enough. When the truth comes for you now, where are you gonna run? Yeah, where are you gonna run tomorrow? Something out there will take you to a place beyond the everyday. This is the day, take what you got. was fulfilled at 0241 local time, May 7, 1945.
So as you can see, all of these events, all these songs rather, are taken from me just looking at certain hours of the day, and things start coming up, and I'm like, okay, great. Sometimes I really allow myself to explore, probably a little bit too far. And I'd like to show you an example of that, because the research really informs the songwriting. So if I allow myself to research too much, it can get a little extreme. So here's the event. At 1:28 a.m. on October 4th, 2006, after reciting pi from memory for 16 hours, a retired engineer named Akira Haraguchi stopped at the 100,000th digit. The guy memorized 100,000 digits of pi. So I started to research that a little bit, and it turns out he would create these stories using this language system that he devised, which would allow him to visualize the digits in pi. So how could I honor that moment? What if I could somehow incorporate 100,000 digits of pi into my song? We all know in Western music there's 12 notes, but what if I condensed it into just 10 notes and assigned each note to a digit in pi? What about converting 100,000 digits of pi into MIDI, which is this type of musical interface that musicians use? What about taking computer-generated voices that are speaking in dozens of different languages and creating interplay between the voices and the music of pi? And finally, what about taking an image of pi, converting it into sound, and then, so now you've got 100,000, this image of 100,000 digits of pi that is actually in the audio of the song. I was able to do all these things because I started on a journey and I just allowed myself to go wherever it took me. And, I started recognizing something weird that was coming up, which is I started creativity as a way of joy because I love writing and recording music, but the project started revealing all these ancillary aspects to joy. Like when I was working on this song, I contacted my cousin's son. His name is Nicholas Seres. He's this brilliant PhD candidate in artificial intelligence and computational neuroscience. I said, hey, Nick, do you think you could convert 100,000 digits of pi into MIDI? And his response was, sure, sounds like fun. Or when I was able to track down an email address for Mr. Haraguchi himself, and I thought, what if I could get him to record one of his stories, like just using a phone or something, just record his voice telling one of the stories, and maybe I could incorporate it within that song. So I wrote him, I wrote him a message. I wrote him an email in Japanese, using Google Translate. And imagine the scope of that, right? Like the scope of this project and trying to explain this to a person in a language I don't speak. And he actually did respond back to me. And his question was, how do I make a recording with my voice on my phone? What he did not know was that I don't actually own a phone with cell service, and that's probably a whole different TED Talk. But using my wife's phone and infographics that we created using screenshots, we made it all work out. He sends me the recording, and now I'm all excited, right? I want to hear I want to know what are these words that he's saying? Like, what is this story? So I send it to my friend who's Japanese, and I asked her to translate it into English. And after listening to it, her response was, I have no idea what he's saying. And now I'm thinking, what did this guy send me, right? And then it occurs to me, of course it doesn't make sense. It's not really Japanese. It's this language system that he created so that he could memorize pi. He's not the only person who responded to me when I reached out. Like when I wanted to write a song about the Ahmed Gabr, he broke the world record for deepest scuba dive, and he wrote back to me. Or when I wanted to write a song about Carlos Sevilla, who was a president of Cuba in the 30s, and his grandson wrote back to me. Or when I wanted to write a song about the first legally recognized gay marriage in Maine, and one of the grooms wrote back to me. All of these have come out of, a process that I had no idea would be there. I just kind of gave myself these parameters and went with it. And then there are all the musicians that have been on this project. Using modern recording techniques and technologies, I'm able to collaborate with musicians from around the world. People who I've never met, old friends who I've reconnected with. The idea is really, this is likely the last big project that I'm going to do before I die. So I'm allowing myself to dream big. And there are certain musicians who I'm friends with, but also big fans of. People like Dave Fridman, Matt McGinley, Jennifer Kimball, Mark Doyle, Peter Moore, Ryan McMillan. If you're lucky enough to know any of those names, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And having these people be part of a day in music is so special to me. And there's lots of great stories I could tell, but there's one story I want to tell in particular. Back in 1985, when I was a teenager, one of my favorite bands was Tears for Fears. And I was especially a big fan of the drummer. His name is Manny Elias. And his playing is, he does all these very creative things that really speak to me. About 15 years later, I'm in a band, and we're lucky enough to be opening up for Julian Lennon. And the drummer in Julian's band was Manny Elias. So now I'm like, I get to see him every night, get to hang out with him a bit. It's like a small tour. We get to become friends. The tour ends. We keep in touch with each other. And then fast forward again to a few years ago when I was working on this project, I kind of got the courage up to say, hey, Manny, do you think you might want to play on one of my songs? And his response was, sure. And now, like today, he's been on like a handful of my songs. And he's asked me to participate on his music project. And our families Zoom together every other weekend. Like, this is, that friendship alone is worth all the hours I've already put into this project. And it's another beautiful example of unintended consequences, unintended joy that has come out of this project. My measure of success is not based on how many people follow me on YouTube, 40. Or Instagram, 58. Or TikTok, 7? Hold on a second. 7? Really? Did anybody fact check that? I didn't think so. Or whatever this stupid number is, 29. Looking at those numbers, think about how easy it would be for me to fall into this trap of thinking that my work is insignificant and meaningless. Now, I know what you're thinking. Phil, why don't you just take those numbers, put them all together, and come up with a huge number like 4,058,729. Okay. But the truth is that the longer I do this, the less interested I am in those numbers. And instead, the measure of my success is based on questions I ask myself like, how much have I enjoyed the creative process? How much have I been enriched by researching a specific event? Who was I fortunate enough to work with? How well have I told someone else's story? How much joy has this song brought me? All artists, no matter what the measure of success, started in the same place. For musicians, when we picked up an instrument, it was a magical experience. And my argument is, why should that change? Clearly, my joy doesn't come from how many fans I have. It comes from the process of creating itself. And I feel like I've hit the jackpot with A Day in Music because the process of creating all this music has presented all these ancillary opportunities for joy. We all have song-worthy moments every day. We just need to stop and recognize them. This moment right now is song-worthy. And if you want to join me on that song, just let me know. I would love to have any of you on that song. I can even tell you when it's going to be released. It'll be on the 4 p.m. album to be released January 1st, 2036. Don't quote me on that. And if you're not interested in, if that's just not your thing, like, to be on a song like that, and you want to support me, I invite you to go to You really have missed the point here, because what I would love you to do is start your own project.com. This project started out as a way to bring creativity into my life. Listening to my music may not change your life, but making this music has changed mine. It grounds me. It's a life force. It's my meaningful work that makes me want to get up in the morning. The plan is for me to put out that final album, the 24th album, far into the future in the year 2043 on January 1st at 11 p.m. I'm only 3 hours into this thing. I may never finish. There's no guarantees in life. But already, my efforts have been rewarded in ways that I could have never anticipated when I started out on this journey. If you've thought about starting a big creative project, or changing your life in some other meaningful way, I hope you're feeling inspired, knowing that even if you never reach your ultimate goal, the steps you take to get there may reward you in completely unexpected ways. Thank you.